The morning sun rose over New Seoul, casting golden light across the crystal towers that reached toward the alien sky. Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood on his balcony, watching the city wake up below him. 3 million people called this planet home. Now, it was hard to believe that just 50 years ago this world was nothing but rocks and poisonous air. The Admiral smiled as he watched children playing in the parks. Human children, but also young ones from other species. The reptilian Vorthak. Kids moved slowly but played fair. The insect-like Kalani children buzzed around excitedly, their wings catching the light. All of them laughed together, speaking the same language, sharing the same games. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Dr. So-Young Kim walked up beside him. She was the colony's head scientist and the person who talked to alien visitors. Her lab coat was already dirty from her morning work. "Every morning is beautiful here," Park replied. "Hard to believe we built all this." Dr. Kim nodded toward the spaceport where ships from a dozen different worlds were landing and taking off. Captain Jin-Ho Lee should be back today. His trade run to the Vorthak worlds went really well. Park had known Captain Lee for 20 years. The man could make friends with anyone, even aliens who looked like giant lizards. That was the human way: find common ground, make friends, build trust. It worked with every species they had met so far. "Admiral, we have incoming ships." His communication device buzzed. Long-range sensors show unknown vessels approaching the system. Park's smile faded a little. Unknown ships usually meant new aliens wanting to trade or explore. But his military training made him careful. "How many ships?" 12 large vessels. "Sir, they're still 6 hours out. Send the usual welcome message, ask them what they want and if they need help." Dr. Kim was already pulling up data on her tablet. "I don't recognize the ship design from any known species. The hulls look crystalline, almost like they're made of glass or diamond. Could be a new type of metal," Park suggested. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe they're just explorers like us." 3 hours later, Captain Lee's merchant ship entered the system. The Busan Pride was loaded with rare metals and art from the Vorthak worlds. Lee always brought back interesting things, not just for profit, but because he loved sharing cultures. "Jin-Ho, we have visitors coming," Park called him on the radio. "Unknown species, 12 ships, you might want to dock quickly." "Unknown ships, how exciting." Lee's voice was cheerful. "Maybe they'll want to trade. I have some beautiful Vorthak sculptures that might interest them." Dr. Kim was working with her team, preparing first contact protocols. Humans had met 17 different alien species in the past century. Each meeting followed the same pattern: careful approach, exchange of basic information, mutual respect, and usually friendship. Some species were more difficult than others, but patience always worked. "The unknown ships are not responding to our messages," the communication officer reported. "We've tried radio, laser communication, and mathematical sequences. Nothing." Park felt a small worry in his stomach. "Maybe they don't understand our methods. Dr. Kim, what do you think?" "Some species communicate in ways we haven't discovered yet," she said. "The Kalani use pheromones along with sound. The Vorthak change skin colors to show emotions. These new aliens might have their own method." Counselor Mira Choi arrived at the command center. She ran the civilian government and usually stayed out of military matters. But first contact with new species was everyone's business. "Have we prepared the welcome gifts?" she asked Dr. Kim. "Music from Earth, samples of our art, basic mathematical concepts, and images of our colony," Dr. Kim replied. "Standard package." "What about food?" "The Kalani loved our honey. We included samples of safe organic compounds, nothing that could harm them if their biology is similar to ours." The unknown ships moved steadily toward the colony. They were beautiful in a cold way, smooth crystal surfaces that caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. The ships were large, each one bigger than Park's flagship, but size didn't always mean danger. The gentle Kalani had enormous ships too. 2 hours until they reached the system boundary, the sensor officer announced. "They're moving in perfect formation. Very precise." Park admired precision. Military formations required training and discipline. These aliens clearly had advanced technology and organization. Keep sending welcome messages, try visual signals, mathematical patterns, peaceful images. Dr. Kim was studying the sensor data. Their ships don't match any known technology. The crystalline structure seems to be both hull and engine somehow. Very elegant design. Maybe they're peaceful explorers like us, Counselor Choi suggested hopefully. They might be curious about our colony. Captain Lee had docked his ship and joined them in the command center. He brought the smell of space travel with him, recycled air and metal corridors. Those are some beautiful ships. The craftsmanship must be incredible. Still no response to our communications, the officer reported. But they're definitely heading straight for us. Maybe they're just careful, Park said, though his worry was growing. Some species take time to decide if strangers are safe. Dr. Kim assembled her first contact team. 20 scientists and diplomats, all trained for meeting new species. They had gifts, translators, and medical equipment. Everything needed for a peaceful meeting. We should prepare a welcome ceremony, Counselor Choi suggested. Show them our culture, our children, our achievements. Let them see that we're builders, not destroyers. Park agreed, but also ordered his defense ships to take positions around the colony. Not aggressive positions, just ready to protect if something went wrong. It was standard procedure. The crystal ships entered the outer system and kept coming. Their formation never changed and they never sent any messages. Park tried to push down his growing concern. Maybe these aliens just didn't understand human communication methods yet. 1 hour until they reach our orbital space, the sensor officer announced. Dr. Kim looked up from her preparations. This is exciting. A completely new species with unknown technology. Think of what we might learn from each other. Park watched the approaching ships on his screen. They were beautiful and mysterious like jewels floating through space. Soon they would meet face to face. He hoped these new aliens would be friends, like all the others before them. He had no way of knowing that these crystal ships carried a species that had never made friends with anyone. The Morvani Collective saw organic life as a disease that needed to be cured. They had been cleaning planets for thousands of years, leaving only empty space behind. The Admiral stood at his command center, surrounded by hope and good intentions, as death approached his peaceful colony. The crystal ships reached the edge of New Sol's orbital space without warning. Admiral Park stood in his command center, watching the beautiful alien vessels approach. Dr. Kim was beside him with her first contact team, ready to greet their new visitors with gifts and friendship. Try sending them pictures of our children playing together, Dr. Kim suggested. Universal signs of peace and life. The communication officer sent the images. Pictures of human, Vorthak, and Kalani children laughing together in the colonies. Parks. These images had worked before with other species, showing that humans cared for life and welcomed friendship. The crystal ships did not respond. Instead, something changed in their formation. They spread out into a perfect circle around the planet, each ship taking an exact position. The movement was so smooth and coordinated that it looked like a dance. Interesting formation, Captain, Lee observed. Very organized. Park felt ice in his stomach. Military formations had purposes. This looked like a siege pattern, but he pushed the thought away. Maybe these aliens just liked geometric shapes. Maybe their culture valued order and precision. Admiral, I'm detecting energy buildup in their ships, the sensor officer called out, voice tight with worry. What kind of energy? Unknown type, sir. Very powerful. Each ship is charging some kind of weapon system. The command center fell silent. Park's training took over, pushing aside hope and replacing it with military reality. All ships, defensive. Positions. Raise shields. This is not a drill. Dr. Kim stepped forward. Wait, Admiral. They might not understand our defensive moves. Let me try one more communication attempt. She activated the emergency broadcast system, sending a message on all frequencies. Her voice was calm and friendly, speaking slowly so any translator could understand. Unknown visitors, this is Dr. So-Young Kim of New Sol Colony. We welcome you in peace. We mean no harm. Please respond if you can hear this message. The response came not in words, but in light. 12 beams of energy erupted from the crystal ships. The light was wrong somehow, not the normal colors of laser weapons, but something that hurt to look at directly. The beams struck the colony's defense satellites first, and the metal structures simply disappeared. Not exploded or melted, they just stopped existing. What kind of weapon does that? Captain Lee whispered. Park was already moving, shouting orders. All civilian ships evacuate the planet immediately. Military vessels, engage the enemy. Send distress signals to Earth and all allied worlds. The crystal ships, the Morvani Collective, had no interest in communication or negotiation. In their cold logic, organic life was a contamination that spread from world to world. They had spent millennia cleaning infected planets, leaving sterile perfection behind. New Sol was just another world that needed to be cured. Captain Lee ran for his ship. The Busan Pride was loaded with civilians now, families with children, elderly people, anyone who could fit. His engines were warming up when the second wave of attacks began. This time, the Morvani targeted the evacuation ships. The passenger transport Inchin Dream was lifting off with 2,000 people aboard when a crystal beam found it. The ship didn't explode. It simply faded away like mist, taking everyone inside with it. Children, parents, grandparents, all gone in a second of wrong-colored light. They're targeting the civilians, Captain Lee shouted into his radio. They're hunting the evacuation ships. Dr. Kim watched in horror from the command center as her life's work disappeared. The research stations where she had studied alien biology, the cultural exchange centers where species learned about each other, the schools where children played together, all of it was being systematically erased. Admiral Park's defense fleet fought back with everything they had. Missiles, energy weapons, kinetic rounds, all of humanity's military technology. Some shots hit the crystal ships, but the alien vessels seemed to absorb the attacks and keep fighting. Their hulls would crack, then heal themselves in seconds. Sir, the Sol Guardian is gone, his aide Ensign Taehyun Yoon reported, voice shaking. Direct hit. No survivors. Park watched his ships die one by one. These weren't warriors fighting other warriors. This was extermination. The aliens showed no anger, no emotion at all. They killed with the same efficiency they might use to clean a dirty floor. Captain Lee's ship was almost at safe distance when a crystal beam grazed his hull. The Busan Pride started coming apart, atmosphere bleeding into space. Lee sealed the bridge and kept flying, carrying his passengers toward the edge of the system while his ship died around him. He didn't make it. Dr. Kim tried to understand what was happening. Why are they doing this? What do they want? But understanding required communication, and the Morvani had never learned to communicate with organic life. They only knew how to clean it away. The colony's cities began to disappear, not destroyed by explosions, simply deleted by the strange energy weapons. Millions of people vanished in seconds. The beautiful towers, the parks where children played, the museums full of art from a dozen worlds, all of it fading into nothing. Admiral Park made his final decision. His flagship was dying, his fleet was gone, and the colony was already lost. But Earth needed to know what had happened here. They needed to know about the crystal ships and their terrible weapons. Taehyun, get to the emergency pod, he ordered, his young aide. Take the sensor records and the communication logs. Make sure Earth learns about this. Sir, I won't leave you, Ensign Yoon protested. That's an order, son. Someone has to survive to tell the story. Park sealed himself on the bridge and began recording his final message. Through the view screen, he could see the crystal ships methodically erasing his world. No anger, no hate, just cold efficiency. This is Admiral Hyun-woo Park of New Sol Colony. He spoke into the recorder. We are under attack by unknown aliens using weapons we cannot fight. They came without words, they showed no mercy. They are killing everyone, civilians, children, everyone. Tell Earth. Tell them to be ready. Tell them to remember us, the A. Final crystal beam found his ship. The Admiral faced it without flinching, still recording until the very end. His last words were lost as the wrong-colored light took him, but his message was already transmitted. carried by Ensign Yoon in the emergency pod. The young officer drifted in the small pod, watching through tears as New Seoul died completely. The Morvani finished their work with mechanical precision. Every building, every ship, every trace of organic life, all of it cleaned away. Even the atmosphere was stripped from the planet, leaving bare rock behind. When their work was complete, the crystal ships reformed their perfect formation and departed. They had cured another world of the organic infection. In their cold logic, it was a good day's work. Ensign Yoon was one of only 847 survivors from 3 million people. They floated in space, scattered across the system, watching their home become a dead rock. The aliens had shown no mercy to anyone, not to children, not to the elderly, not to the other alien species who lived peacefully on New Seoul. The massacre was complete. The crystal ships disappeared into deep space, looking for the next world that needed to be cleaned. Behind them, they left only empty space and the painful question that would drive humanity to become something terrible. What do you do when someone shows your children no mercy at all? Captain Dongmin Han guided his mining ship through the outer edge of Earth's solar system. The Incheon runner had been limping home for 6 months, her engines barely working after the desperate escape from New Seoul. Han was one of the survivors. He had been mining asteroids when the crystal ships arrived and destroyed everything. He still had nightmares about it, the wrong-colored light that made things disappear, the screams on the radio that suddenly went silent, the way 3 million people just stopped existing. Earth traffic control. This is mining vessel Incheon runner requesting emergency docking. Han spoke into his radio. His voice was tired and rough from months of recycled air and grief. Incheon runner, you're 6 months overdue. We thought you were lost. What happened out there? Han closed his eyes. New Seoul is gone. Everyone is dead. I need to speak to the Earth Council immediately. The words sent shockwaves through the communication networks. Within hours, every government on Earth was trying to contact Han's ship. New Seoul had been humanity's greatest colony, a symbol of their success among the stars. 3 million people couldn't just be gone, but they were. Fleet Admiral Hyejin Seo met Han's ship personally at the lunar docking station. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Behind her stood President Ji-woo Nam, the elected leader of United Earth, and General Woo Seok-kang, head of military special operations. Han stumbled off his ship, still weak from the long journey. In his hands he carried data storage devices, sensor records, communication logs, and the personal accounts of the survivors. 847 people out of 3 million. Captain Han, tell us what happened, President Nam said gently. Han looked at the faces around him, good people, leaders who had spent their careers building peace and prosperity. He was about to destroy their world with his words. They came without warning, he began. Crystal ships, 12 of them. Beautiful like diamonds, but wrong somehow. We tried to talk to them, sent every kind of peaceful message we knew. They never responded. Admiral Seo was studying the sensor data on her tablet. These energy signatures, I've never seen anything like this. The weapons don't destroy things, Han continued. They make them disappear, like they never existed at all. They started with our defense satellites, then the evacuation ships. They targeted civilians on purpose. General Kang's face was hard as stone. Military targets make sense, but civilians? Children playing in parks, hospitals full of patients, school transports trying to escape. They killed them all with the same cold efficiency. No anger, no emotion. Like they were cleaning a dirty room. President Nam sat down, heavily. She had children of her own, grandchildren who played in parks just like the ones on New Seoul. How many survivors? 847. All of us were off-planet when it happened. Miners, traders, research teams. Everyone on the surface died. Dr. Young-Soo Jang, Earth's chief military scientist, was analyzing the weapon signatures. This technology is completely unknown. It doesn't just destroy matter. It seems to unravel it at the quantum level. How do you fight something like that? You don't, Han said quietly. Admiral Park tried. Every ship in the defense fleet attacked them. Our weapons barely scratched their hulls, and even when we did damage, the crystal ships healed themselves. The room fell silent. These were people who had spent their lives believing in diplomacy, negotiation, and peaceful solutions. They had made friends with 17 different alien species through patience and understanding. There has to be some way to communicate with them, President Nam said hopefully. Every species has motivations, needs, desires. If we can understand what they want, Ensign Tae Hyun-yoon spoke up from the corner. He was one of the younger survivors, Admiral Park's former aide. Ma'am, with respect, they don't want anything from us. They just want us gone. All organic life gone. Admiral Seo was thinking like a military commander. If they're systematically destroying human colonies, they'll come here eventually. Earth is the obvious target. How long do we have? President Nam asked. Based on their movement patterns and the time between attacks, maybe 2 years, General Kang estimated. If they're really cleaning every world with organic life, they'll work their way toward populated systems. Then we have time for diplomacy, the president said firmly. We can send envoys, prepare translation systems, find some way to make them understand we're not a threat. Captain Han laughed bitterly. Ma'am, they watched our children trying to evacuate and hunted them down like animals. They saw families holding each other and made them disappear. What part of that suggests they want to talk? The debate that followed split Earth's leadership. President Nam led one faction that insisted on diplomatic solutions. Admiral Seo led another that demanded immediate military preparation. For weeks, the Earth Council argued while the survivors gave their testimonies. The turning point came when they released Broadcast 847, a collection of survivor accounts, sensor recordings, and Admiral Park's final message. The broadcast went out to every human settlement, every news network, every family on Earth. People watched their children playing and imagined crystal beams making them disappear. They saw footage of evacuation ships being hunted down deliberately. They heard Admiral Park's last words. They came without words. They showed no mercy. The reaction was unlike anything in human history. Protests erupted in every major city, but these weren't peace protests. Millions of people demanded action, demanded protection, demanded that Earth fight back before the crystal ships arrived. Parents held their children and asked their leaders a simple question. What will you do when those ships come here? The Earth Council met in emergency session. President Nam still advocated for diplomacy, but her support was crumbling. We have to try negotiation first. It's who we are as a species. Fleet Admiral Seo stood up, her voice cutting through the debate. Madam President, negotiation requires two parties willing to communicate. These aliens have made their position clear. They see organic life as something to be exterminated. But surely there's some way to reach them, Nam insisted. Ensign Yoon requested permission to speak. The young survivor stood before the assembled leaders, still wearing his torn uniform from New Seoul. Leaders of Earth, I watched my admiral die trying to protect children. I saw families torn apart by weapons. We can't understand. I drifted in space for days, watching my home become a dead rock. His voice grew stronger. You ask about negotiation? They had 6 hours to respond to our peaceful messages. 6 hours to show any sign they understood we were intelligent beings. Instead, they spent that time positioning themselves to kill us, more efficiently. The room was completely silent. The children on New Seoul didn't get to vote on diplomacy. Yoon continued. They just died. How many more children will die while we're trying to talk to monsters who don't have ears? General Kang stepped forward. The boy is right. Sometimes the choice isn't between war and peace. Sometimes it's between fighting and dying. The vote was unanimous. President Nam spoke the words that would transform humanity forever. The Earth Council authorizes Operation Righteous Fury. We will prepare for war. Admiral Seo nodded grimly. They showed our children no mercy. They will receive none in return. Dr. Zhang was already working on reverse engineering the crystal ship technology. General Kang was planning training programs for a new kind of warfare. The survivors were being interviewed by military analysts. Every detail of the attack studied and memorized. Earth's shipyards began working around the clock. Peaceful trade vessels were converted to warships. Exploration crews were retrained as soldiers. The species that had spent a century making friends was learning to make war, but in quiet moments, some leaders wondered what they were becoming. President Nam watched her grandchildren playing and feared that the crystal ships had already won, not by destroying Earth, but by forcing humanity to become something terrible. The survivors knew better. They had seen what mercy looked like when your enemy showed none in return. They had watched diplomacy fail against absolute evil. Earth was preparing for war, but more than that, Earth was preparing for vengeance. 2 years had passed since New Soul died, and Earth was no longer the same world. Dr. Young-Soo Jang worked 18-hour days in his laboratory, surrounded by pieces of crystal ship hull recovered from the massacre site. The fragments had cost 17 lives to retrieve, but they were worth their weight in human blood. The crystal isn't just armor, he explained to Fleet Admiral CO during her daily briefing. It's a living system that repairs itself and channels energy, but we found the weakness. Jang held up a small device that hummed with dangerous energy. Resonance frequency weapons. If we hit them at exactly the right vibration, their hulls shatter instead of healing. Admiral CO studied the weapon with satisfaction. How many can you make? Every human ship will have them within 6 months, Jang promised. But that's not the best part. He activated a holographic display showing the crystal ship's energy signatures. Their weapons work by quantum disruption. They unravel matter at the molecular level, but the same technology can be reversed, meaning we can make their own weapons, tear them apart from the inside. Across Earth, the transformation continued. General Wu Xiaokang had established training centers on every continent, turning ordinary people into the Hunter Corps, soldiers specifically designed to fight the Morvani. They learned to think like the crystal ships, to be as cold and efficient as their enemies. Show no mercy, Kang told each graduating class. They killed our children without hesitation. We will return the favor. Commander Haewon Park stood before her strike force, 500 ships ready for the first counterattack. She was Admiral Hyun-woo Park's daughter, and she had volunteered to lead humanity's revenge. The fury in her eyes burned cold as space itself. My father died protecting New Seoul, she told her captains. He believed in diplomacy until the end. But diplomacy requires an enemy willing to talk. The Morvani have made their choice clear. Her flagship was called New Seoul's Vengeance, built from the ground up as a weapon of war. Every system, every weapon, every piece of equipment was designed for one purpose: killing crystal ships. Admiral Sung-Ho Lim commanded the shipyards that worked day and night, building the largest fleet in human history. Civilian factories were converted to military production. Mining ships became carriers. Exploration vessels became destroyers. Even school ships were armed and armored. We're not just building a navy, Lim reported to the Earth Council. We're building an extermination fleet. The other alien species watched humanity's transformation with growing alarm. The Vorthak Empire sent diplomatic messages expressing concern about human military buildup. The Kalani swarms offered to mediate between humanity and the crystal ships. Fleet Admiral Seo's response was broadcast across the galaxy. The time for mediation died with New Seoul. We offered the Morvani peace. They chose genocide. Now they will face the consequences. The alien species had known humans as peaceful traders and skilled diplomats. This new humanity frightened them. The species that had once shared their children's games was building weapons that could crack planets. But the survivors of New Seoul understood. Ensign Yoon, now promoted to admiral, spoke for all of them. You cannot negotiate with extinction. You can only fight it. The first test came when human long-range scouts detected a Morvani cleansing fleet approaching the Proxima system. 12 crystal ships, the same pattern as New Seoul. They were moving toward a mining colony with 50,000 people. Commander Park's strike force was ready. This is where we find out if our children died for something, she told her fleet. As they approached the ambush point, the crystal ships entered the system exactly as expected. moving in their perfect formation toward the mining colony. They ignored all communication attempts just like before, but this time they were not hunting helpless civilians. "All ships, fire on my command," Commander Park ordered. The resonance weapons struck the crystal hulls, and for the first time, in millennia Morvani ships began to crack instead of heal. The aliens tried to adapt, changing their hull frequency, but human computer systems adapted faster. "Their shields are fluctuating," reported Captain Yu-Jin Cha from her stealth bomber. Moving in for the kill, the battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 12 crystal ships were dead, their beautiful hulls shattered into glittering debris. For the first time since they began their galactic cleansing, the Morvani had faced total defeat. More importantly, the human forces left no survivors. "Search every piece of wreckage," Commander Park ordered. "If anything is still alive, kill it." They showed our people no mercy. We returned the gesture. News of the victory spread across human space like wildfire. Earth's population celebrated in the streets. The survivors of New Sol wept with relief and rage. Finally, someone had made the crystal ships pay for their crimes. But the victory came with a cost. Commander Park watched her crews searching the wreckage with cold efficiency, executing wounded Morvani without hesitation. These were good people, teachers, engineers, parents, who had learned to kill without mercy. "Are we becoming monsters?" she asked Admiral Yoon during a private moment. Yoon looked at the debris field where 12 genocide ships floated dead. "The monsters are the ones who started this war by murdering children. We're just finishing it." The Morvani collective felt confusion for the first time in their existence. One of their cleansing fleets had been destroyed by organic life. It was impossible, like bacteria defeating an antibiotic. They began to study these humans more carefully. They discovered that humans were different from other organic species. Most creatures fled when faced with extinction. Humans adapted and fought back. Most species sought negotiation when threatened. Humans chose vengeance. The Morvani sent larger fleets to human colonies. Each time they found human forces waiting in ambush. Earth's children had become expert killers, using the crystal ship's own technology against them. Worse, the humans showed the same cold efficiency the Morvani prided themselves on. "They fight like we do," one Morvani commander reported to the collective. "Without emotion, without mercy, with perfect tactical precision." "Impossible," the collective replied. "Organic life is chaotic and emotional. Not these humans. They have become something else." Admiral Seo stood in her command center, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Human forces were winning battle after battle, but the victories were changing them. The species that once welcomed alien children into their schools was learning to hunt those same aliens to extinction. "We're not the same people we were 2 years ago," President Nam observed. She had aged years and months, the weight of command crushing her peaceful nature. "No, we're not," Seo agreed. "But we're alive. New Sol's children aren't getting that chance." General Kang joined them, his report grim but satisfying. "Our Hunter Corps are performing beyond expectations. 98% kill rate against Morvani forces. No prisoners taken, no mercy shown." "Good," Seo said simply. President Nam flinched. "Heejin, listen to yourself. 2 years ago you would have been horrified by those words." 2 years ago my species hadn't been marked for extinction," the Admiral replied. "The Morvani made their choice when they decided to kill our children. Now they face the consequences." The war was changing both sides. The Morvani, who had never faced effective resistance, were learning to fear. The humans, who had never faced complete evil, were learning to be complete in their response. Deep in space, the two species circled each other like ancient predators. One had chosen genocide, the other had chosen vengeance. Only one would survive to see the end. But Earth's children were no longer the peaceful explorers who had built New Sol. They were something new, something terrible and efficient. They were humanity's answer to extinction. They were the weapon that mercy had forged in the fires of absolute loss. The Morvani home system had never known war. For millions of years, the crystal cities had orbited their binary stars in perfect peace, sending out cleansing fleets to purify the galaxy of organic infection. The collective believed they were untouchable, Protected by distance and superior technology, they were wrong. Fleet Admiral Hye-Jin Seo stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching 10,000 human ships emerge from hyperspace around the Morvani worlds. Every vessel humanity could arm had come for this final battle. Warships, converted civilian craft, even school transports loaded with weapons, all of them burning with 3 years of carefully nurtured rage. "All ships, this is Admiral Seo," she broadcast to the massive fleet. "Today we end the species that murdered our children. Today New Sol is avenged. Show them the same mercy they showed our families." The binary stars cast strange double shadows across the crystal cities that floated in space. Beautiful structures of living diamond, each one home to millions of Morvani. They had built their civilization to be perfect and eternal, never imagining that organic life could threaten them. Admiral Sung Ho Lim commanded the siege ships that surrounded each world. "First bombardment wave ready, Admiral. Resonance weapons locked on target." General Wu Seok Kang led the Hunter Corps aboard assault transports. His soldiers were no longer the peaceful humans who had once traded with aliens. 3 years of war had forged them into something colder and more dangerous than the Morvani themselves. "Ground forces ready for planetary assault," Kang reported. "We'll hunt down every last one of them." Captain Yu-Jin Cha piloted the experimental stealth bombers that would strike the Morvani command centers. Her ships were invisible to crystal ship sensors, carrying weapons designed specifically to shatter diamond hulls. "Stealth wing in position," she confirmed, beginning attack run on their leadership complex. The Morvani collective felt something they had never experienced in their long existence. Fear. Their perfect crystal ships, which had cleansed 1,000 worlds, were being systematically destroyed by the very organic life they had tried to eliminate. For the first time in their history, they attempted to communicate. The message came on all frequencies, transmitted in mathematical concepts that any intelligent species could understand. It was a simple concept: surrender, negotiation, cessation of hostilities. Fleet Admiral Seo received the transmission and played it for her command staff. The room fell silent as they listened to their enemy's first attempt at diplomacy. "They want to talk," President Nam said from Earth via quantum communication. Even across the galaxy, her voice carried desperate hope. "They're finally trying to communicate." Admiral Seo studied the transmission data, then looked at the crystal cities, floating peacefully in space. Beautiful structures filled with beings who had shown no mercy to children playing in parks. "Admiral Yoon," she called to the survivor of New Sol. "You were there when we tried to talk to them. What do you think?" Yoon's scarred face was hard as stone. "They had 6 hours to respond to our peaceful messages at New Sol. They chose silence. They chose to hunt down evacuation ships. They chose to make children disappear." "But they're trying now," President Nam insisted. "Doesn't that mean something?" Commander Haewon Park spoke from her assault ship. "Ma'am, with respect, where was this willingness to communicate when my father was trying to save 3 million lives?" The debate that followed lasted only minutes. The survivors of New Sol spoke with one voice. The time for negotiation had passed 3 years ago, when the Morvani ignored every peaceful overture and chose genocide instead. "All ships," Admiral Seo broadcast to the human fleet. "The enemy is attempting surrender. Our response is simple. They showed our children no mercy. They will receive none in return." The first bombardment wave struck the outer crystal cities. Resonance weapons shattered diamond hulls that had been considered unbreakable. The Morvani's own quantum disruption technology, reverse-engineered by human scientists, turned their beautiful structures into collapsing ruins. The Morvani tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for exterminating helpless civilizations, not battling an enemy that had learned to be as ruthless as they were. Human forces attacked with the same cold efficiency the crystal ships had once shown, but with better tactics and superior motivation. Captain Cha's stealth bombers found the collective's central command complex, a massive crystal structure that had coordinated genocide across the galaxy for millennia. Her weapons turned it into glittering debris in seconds. "Primary target destroyed," she reported with satisfaction. The brain of their operation is gone. General Kang's Hunter Corps landed on the Crystal Worlds, fighting through the ruins of shattered cities. The Morvani had never faced ground combat. They had always killed from space, safe in their ships. Now human soldiers hunted them through their own homes with weapons designed to crack crystal armor. No prisoners, Kang ordered his troops. They are a genocidal species. We end the threat permanently. The battle raged for days, but the outcome was never in doubt. Humanity had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, building weapons specifically to kill crystal ships, training soldiers specifically to hunt Morvani. Every tactic, every strategy, every piece of equipment had one purpose: extinction. The Morvani sent more surrender messages, increasingly desperate. They offered technology, resources, even their own crystal cities as payment for mercy. They transmitted images of their young, their art, their culture, everything they had never shared with the species they had exterminated. Admiral Seo watched the surrender offers with cold eyes. Did they offer to spare our young at New Seoul? She asked her staff. No, ma'am, Admiral Yoon replied. They made them disappear without a word. Then they understand our response. The crystal cities fell one by one. Each world was systematically cleansed of Morvani life, using the same efficient methods the aliens had once employed against others. Human forces showed no emotion, no anger, just the cold professionalism of a species that had learned to wage total war. Dr. Youngsu Jang watched from his research ship as the last Morvani stronghold crumbled. He had spent 3 years learning their technology, understanding their weapons, finding their weaknesses. Now his knowledge was being used to erase them completely. It's almost over, he reported to Earth. The species that destroyed New Seoul will be extinct within hours. President Nam's voice carried across space, heavy with the weight of what they had become. Are we monsters now? Have we become the very thing we fought against? Admiral Seo considered the question as she watched the final crystal city collapse into ruins. The monsters were the ones who chose to kill children without negotiation. We're simply finishing what they started. The last Morvani died fighting in the ruins of their perfect cities. They had never learned to surrender properly, never developed concepts of mercy or negotiation. In the end, their absolute nature destroyed them as completely as it had destroyed their victims. When the battle ended, the Morvani collective was extinct. Their crystal ships were debris. Their cities were ruins. Their species was gone from the universe, remembered only as a cautionary tale about what happens when genocide meets vengeance. Admiral Yoon established a memorial on the ruins of the largest crystal city. It was simple. A list of names from New Seoul, 3 million people who had died because they believed in peace and diplomacy. At the bottom, a single line in every known language. They showed our children no mercy. We returned the gesture. The human fleet began the long journey home, carrying the survivors to new worlds built on Morvani ruins. They had won the war completely, achieving something unprecedented in galactic history: the total extinction of another intelligent species. But victory came with a price. The humans who returned to Earth were not the same ones who had left. They had learned to kill without mercy, to wage war without restraint, to become the very monsters they had once feared. They had proven that when pushed to extinction, humanity could become more dangerous than any threat the galaxy had ever known. Other alien species watched from the shadows, taking careful note of what they had witnessed. The peaceful traders, who had welcomed their children into human schools, were gone. In their place stood something terrible and efficient, something that had learned to answer genocide with genocide. Earth celebrated its victory, but in quiet moments, people wondered what they had become. The species that had once made friends across the galaxy had learned to make war with total efficiency. They had saved themselves by becoming the greatest threat the universe had ever seen. But the survivors of New Seoul slept peacefully for the first time in 3 years. Justice had been served. Vengeance was complete. The children who had died playing in parks were finally avenged. And in the cold depths of space, other species took careful note. Humanity had chosen vengeance over diplomacy, and they had chosen it absolutely.